Welcome to our conversation on organizational design. We started out with how do I become a more critical thinker? How do I become a strategic thinker? And then as a thinker, what theories or models do I have that I can create in order to address the very dynamic environment in which I live? And from experience, I'm telling you, today is probably going to be the most stable day of your work life. It's just going to get more challenging each day into the future, and that's pretty exciting. So I want to lay down for you some thinking around how do we go about taking all of these activities, all of these resources, and all of these people and put them into an organization that makes some sense. So we'll start by taking a look at the alignment of organization's structure with the strategy within our organization. So again, we have a direction we want to go, but we have to set up a structure or a framework in which work is done and people operate that'll help drive that strategy. So at the core, we need to understand why is it that we as humans want to form organizations? Why don't we just simply pick up our spear, go out into the wild, and kill our game, come back and cook it around a fire and feed ourselves? Well, what we've learned is that when you study human beings, there really isn't a whole heck of a lot of difference between how we behaved when we were living in caves to how we behave when we're in large organizational structures. That at the core, there's a biological sense of why it is we behave the way we are. There's a sociological sense of why we behave, and there's a psychological sense of why we behave the way that we do. And understanding those behaviors may help us as managers be more effective in leading and guiding our organizations. So at the core, we came together for protection. And when you think about it today, we're still coming together in organizations to help protect us. The waves of change are so significant that we feel if I try to do it on my own, I simply can't function well. If I have a partner, if I have an organization around me, it's going to help buffer some of that radical change that's taking place out there. We also want to try to survive. And E.O. Wilson wrote in The Social Conquest of Earth a very interesting treatise on how we've adapted over time and how those adaptations have allowed us to survive. So we didn't start to come together because we needed a kumbaya moment. We found that people that started to form organizations were more effective hunters, that people that came together and had people that were more skilled at gathering were the people that survived. So wired into our DNA is a survival mode, and at the core of the survival mode is the need to form and operate in organizations. So biologically, we as human beings are driven towards being part of an organization. We also go into an organization to try to make sense of what's going on in the world. We're confronted with things that confuse us, but if we can come together in a group and we can start to have dialogue with each other, we can start to make some sense out of this radical change and some of the waves that have hit us. To dig deeper, you want to get into Carl Weick's work and start to read about the whole social psychology of what operates. And again, there's that need for sense making, and if you need a guide to start you on that journey, he's a very, very good launch point for you. We also have a psychological need for being connected to other people. At a very primal level, we want to be in a group. We want to have group interaction. And again, it's a combination of a biological need, a sociological need, and when you get into taking a look at how our brain operates, we even have a basis in our primal psychological need. So Lawrence, when he was doing his research into the neuroscience of motivation, found that one of our core pillars, one of our core motivators, is a need for belonging. So you can see that forming organizations and being part of an organization is very important to us as we try to make sense of what's going on today and helping us shape the future. Malcolm X said in one of his speeches, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today." So as a manager, as a leader, we need to be thinking about how we put together an organization that can handle the waves that are crashing around it in our hyper-competitive marketplace. So let me give you some foundational thinking on organizational design. So we have an environment that's rapidly changing, and we need to figure out how we start to organize. So our organizational structure delineates who's responsible for what role they play, how we're going to control human behavior, how we hold people accountable, how we make decisions, who makes decisions, and what authority we have. So here's a nice roadmap for you if you're coming in as a new manager or a new leader to think about, is your organization designed in a way that's going to drive your strategy, or is it designed in a way that's hindering your strategy? And to my mind, your design is going to overpower your strategy in a heartbeat. When you take a look at your structural options of how you're doing this, you can organize your company or your department or your function in a very loose manner that's very organic, and we're going to give you some of the attributes of each. Some examples of loose organizations are matrix organizations, virtual organizations, or you can be very bureaucratic and tight in the way that you design your organization. And in those situations, what's really important is control, that you wanted to have processes that can be repeated, and you try to have operating procedures as much as possible. Understand that this isn't an advocacy for being at one end or the other end of this spectrum. You want to develop the flexibility of mind to be able to look at your strategy, look at your situation, and then design your organization along that continuum in a manner that's going to be most effective. So let's take a look at some of the options that are available to you. You can take a look at how you communicate within the organization. So you can take a look at the tasks that people are doing. They can be narrow or broad. Again, the responsibility that people have, the task flexibility, the decision rights. And this gets very interesting in doing a lot of coaching at the executive level. It's fascinating how decision rights tend to not be clearly delineated, so you're getting a lot of conflict between individuals because that work wasn't done well. How reliant is the organization on hierarchy? So again, very, very structured environments or very loose environments. The whole idea of how communication occurs within the organization. It can be very top-down, or it can be very vertical, or it can flow from all different directions. You can take a look at how reliant people are on instructions or directions from superiors when it comes to make a decision, or how autonomous. Again, right now, one of the biggest challenges in organizations is driving decision-making down to the lowest level of competence. Loyalty to the organization, how is that defined? And the types of relationships that take place within the organization is always important. Gary Richardson laid out a really worthwhile map in taking a look at the criteria for organizational design. And you can read the different elements of that as I go through it. But he talks about, is the organization designed for high efficiency? And again, if it's very highly efficient, then you want to be very mechanistic because that's the most efficient way to run it. If efficiency isn't your primary concern, if creativity is probably more important, then you operate more on the lower scale. And then there's a responsiveness to the marketplace. If you take a look at high responsiveness and high efficiency, that is a real challenge, and you'll see that organizations tend to either operate on the centralized side or the decentralized side. So again, you need to take a look at your environment, your strategy, and then where in this grid is the best space for you to operate. So an argument for a more structured approach towards organization is laid out in Fishman's book, The Org. He did an excellent job of making a case for bureaucracy. By nature, by disposition, and probably by personality defect, I'm pretty much an anarchist, and I love operating in a space where change is taking place all the time. Reading the book, The Org, was a very good book for me to use to help me understand that in some environments, it's critically important to have a structure around you. He tells story after story of what happens when organizations provide too much flexibility within the organization to make decisions, and bad decisions tend to be made and people tended to get hurt. So now I'd like to take you on our journey out to the edge. We promised you that in each of these conversations we'd take the concepts at the foundation and then move them forward. What we're seeing today is organizations are becoming far more reliant on strategic alliances. We simply don't have the intellectual bandwidth, the resources to deal with the challenges that we face alone. We need to reach out and start to partner with people to do things. Here's a list of some of the ways in which people do that. We can look at joint ventures. I did some work with Sutter, and one of the things they're doing in their alliances is starting to form alliances within their own organization. So they're reaching out across functions, they're reaching across geographic areas to align people to accomplish great things. So these, again, are just some ideas of what you see happening. The equity investment is also a fascinating area where companies that don't have particular knowledge in an area, but there's some young startups out there, and they're investing in them to do things. When I was working in China, I saw this concept of strategic alliances operating on a very large scale. In Beijing, I saw the IBM Development Center in Beijing, where they took a look at pushing creativity on that side. GM, what absolutely blew me away in Shanghai, was setting up a design center. So you think of China as manufacturing on a mass scale. Now all of a sudden, the automotive industry is seeing China as a resource for creativity and talent. Another place, if you're a moviegoer, is take a look at who's producing and who's involved in the productions of the movies that you're watching. And you're going to start to see that there's a significant amount of Chinese, Hong Kong investment or actual work being done in those areas. One concern that I've had for a long time, and I see in a number of organizations, is this concept of siloed thinking, where organizations are being designed to where they compress to a very narrow perspective so that people are thinking only of what makes their unit work or their particular part of an organization work or their organization alone work without thinking about how to integrate what you're doing with other people. So Gillian points out a very persuasive argument for how we need to start to deal with that. I love the concept of silo busters. Again, I was in full disclosure that I'm a bit of an anarchist. I love people that tear down barriers between people, between parts of an organization, and between organizations and the external environment. In the seminars that I do, we spend a lot of time on General McChrystal's book, The Team of Teams. It's fascinating to me that an individual that operated in the special ops community, which is pretty much in the shadow, all of a sudden has become one of the top business authors on the scene today. And McChrystal took on a very unique task. He took over the Joint Special Operations Task Force for the Middle East, and he made a comment that was very telling. He said he took a look at the troops at his disposal and that they are tremendously competent for dealing with a world that no longer exists. And it's fascinating to me when I go into organizations and have conversations with their board or with their executives, and they talk about their skills, they talk about their competence, and they talk about how wonderful they are. And then I ask the question, that is really great. How does that align with the world in which you're looking to operate? And you'll start to see some significant disconnects. So what McChrystal did was take a look at his, pardon my pun, I'm a former soldier so I can make these comments. I took a look at his knuckle draggers and door kickers and said, how do I have SEALs and Rangers, Delta Force, Special Forces operate as one organization? And this is what he did. He said, we need to get the biggest picture down to the person that's going through the door or jumping out of that airplane or that helicopter so they understand the strategic intent of what we're trying to accomplish. That he tore down the silos between the different services and functions. And one of the radical things he did was he assigned people across units. So he had Navy SEALs coming in working with Special Forces teams on the ground with Delta so that they got a sense of the air that was breathed by those folks to help tear that down. And then he said, look, we can't attack a problem by ourselves. We have to reach out across our organization and outside our organization to put together teams to do that. And once he created those teams, he created a command structure that was also composed of teams so that they knew how to coordinate multiple teams' activities to drive them in a strategic direction. And then he created absolute transparency within the organization, which tied to his big picture, which was everybody gets to know everything before they go on a particular mission. So in business, we get very protective about the information that we have, and we don't want to share that with another unit or another part of the company. And McChrystal said this is nonsense. And if you can imagine the challenge of any of you that have military experience trying to get the Army to share their intelligence with the Navy share their intelligence with other people, then you layer on top of that the whole alphabet soup, the CIA, the NSA, the other intelligence agencies, and he said, no, all that data needs to be declassified to the point that that soldier on the ground or that trooper on the ground has the same intelligence as the CIA director or the NSA director or the National Security Advisor. With that level of transparency, we can do good things. So my challenge to you is to design organizations that are hyper flexible, very adaptive, and are not going to just survive the chaos in which you're operating, but your folks are going to come to work every day energized that this is an exciting way to get things done. Thank you for paying attention, and we'll start to put together some more conversations for you.